Hey guys, Sam from Meadow Rabbits here, and today we are at the new location and we are going to be talking about where to site your meat rabbitry. In other words, where on your property should you physically locate your rabbitry? This is the latest video in our Getting Started with Meat Rabbits series, and if you've been following along, you already know why you want to get into meat rabbits, what kind of rabbitry you want to have, and what kind of breeds you want to raise. So the next logical question is, how do we start setting up the rabbitry? And the most important part of that is deciding where it's going to be. Now on the surface, this might seem like a simple topic, but keep in mind that this is going to be a lot of infrastructure we're talking about. It's probably going to be somewhat expensive and not very mobile. So it's one of those things you want to put a little bit of thought into in advance, because it can either make your life a lot easier or a lot harder later on down the line. So to break things down, we're going to run through each of the things you need to look at when deciding where to locate your rabbitry. And at the end of the video, I will run you through the ideal location that I've chosen on the new property. So let's get into it. As we walk through these things, I want you to envision the day-to-day. What is it going to be like for your regular chores? We have a really bad tendency, especially when we're excited about something, to visualize the positive when everything's great. Everything is easy with meat rabbits when it's a nice, peaceful summer afternoon. What about when it's negative 20 degrees out in the middle of the winter, it's pitch black at 4 p.m. and you have to go out and take care of the rabbits? Or what about when it's been raining for 3 weeks straight and everything is waterlogged out there and you need to do chores? By thinking about the worst case scenarios and the extreme cases, you can make it a lot easier during those tough times and even better during the good times. The elephant in the room here obviously being that land size is going to play a huge role in the decisions you make, and I totally get it. The great thing about meat rabbits is that they can be done on a very small scale, on very small lots, but that is also going to constrain a lot of your choices here and is going to make a lot of decisions for you. If you're on a small suburban lot, for example, your number one concern is probably going to be avoiding pissing off your neighbors or getting the Board of Health called on you. On the other hand, if you're out in the middle of nowhere with a ton of land, or even if you're just out in the boondocks, you're going to be much more worried about, say, predators rather than neighbors. Obviously, in all these situations, more land is going to be better because it gives you more options, but don't let that discourage you if you don't have a large lot, because we're really shooting for as good as we can get in your circumstances, and what I'm listing are ideals to shoot for. They're not rules that are going to destroy your rabbitry if you can't hit them. So let's start with the necessities, food and water. Water being the most important. For most people, no matter how much land they have, water is probably going to be coming from their house or close to it. If you've got city water, that's going to be feeding through your basement most likely. If you're on well water, chances are it's still feeding through your basement. And unless you've got a separate livestock well way in the back somewhere, that's your water source. No matter what system you have, you're going to have access to water, easy access to water. If you've got crocks, you're going to be refilling those every day. If you've got bottles, every couple of days. Even if you've got an automatic watering system, you're going to have to top off those reservoirs probably once a week. And if you hard plumb in water all the way out to where your rabbits are, that's great. But the further away it is from your water supply, the more that's going to cost as well. Water is simple and essential. The easy rule is the more often you need to refill your water, the closer you're going to need to be to your water supply. And as a general rule, the closer you can get, the better anyways. Following that right up with food, chances are your rabbit's food is going to be located in one of three locations: your house in something like a garage, a shed near your house, or some kind of barn. Now you might think food is similar to water. You want to keep it close so you can easily feed your rabbits, but the truth is actually somewhat counterintuitive. I prefer to keep my main food supply as far away from my animals as possible. The primary reason for this is pests. The great thing about meat rabbits is that their pellets don't have a lot of grain in them and they're not very attractive to most rodents, but they can still attract some pests, and even in the most pest-proof barns and sheds, a bunch of hay sitting around is going to attract pests as well. This goes double if you're keeping your rabbit food with other animal food you may have, like chicken food, which might as well be called rat crack. Keeping your food in hay storage a long way away from your animals will do 95% of the work of keeping pest pressure down. I feel like a lot of people who have issues with rats, with meat rabbits, are either free feeding their rabbits or storing their food in the same location as their rabbits. That being said, lugging huge amounts of food out to your rabbits every day is also pretty inconvenient, so I tend to shoot for a hybrid approach. Food, hay, and supplies stored as far away from the meat rabbits as possible, with a 3-day to maybe 1 week supply worth of food stored with the meat rabbits in a totally rodent-proof container. So as far as siting your meat rabbitry is concerned, try to keep it further away from your food storage area if you can. If you have a few rabbits, this probably isn't an issue. If you've got hundreds of rabbits, it's something you definitely want to think about. And obviously in all situations, you should try to store food in rodent-proof containers and eliminate rodent habitat. While we're on the subject of pests, let's talk about where you want to locate your compost piles. The simple fact is rabbits produce a ton of manure. And while rabbit manure is awesome because you can apply it directly to your beds, you can use it directly as fertilizer, chances are it's going to pile up faster than you can use it, and you're going to need some place to store it and break it down into a more stable form, i.e. compost. The number one consideration when it comes to rabbit manure is odors. Now, rabbit manure has significantly less odors than pretty much every other breed of livestock that I know of. But that being said, on a hot summer day, 25 rabbits are going to produce some smell. If you're on a small lot in a suburban area or just really don't like odors, that's going to be your number one concern. Keeping that compost pile as far away from your living space or your neighbors is going to be a priority. On the flip side, the further away it is, the longer you're going to have to haul manure, and if you have to walk 5 minutes with each wheelbarrow load of manure, it's going to make chore time take a lot longer. So again, as with all things on this list, the goal is to find a happy medium to keep it out of smelling range, but also close enough where it's not inconvenient. When you're looking at your lot, you want to think strategically about this. Where do the prevailing winds usually come from? What areas kind of funnel smells in a certain direction? And obviously locate your compost piles accordingly. And if you have to choose between you smelling it or your neighbor smelling it, it's probably better for you to be the one who smells it. Believe me, it's worth it to have happy neighbors. If you're in a larger lot and you've got the space and your rabbits are pretty far away from your house and you don't mind the smell, you can locate the compost piles right next to your rabbits with no issue. The only other thing to keep in mind here, though, is that if you want to compost other things, which I assume most of us do, like food scraps, that will attract more rodents, and for the same reasons that we want to keep food supplies away from our rabbits, we want to keep those kind of composting food scraps away from our rabbits as well. Again, you're eliminating that rat problem, so you'll never see a rat in your rabbitry or lose a kit to a rodent. So this brings us to our next point, which is predators. Now, in my opinion, the most important predator control method is having well-built cages raised off the ground. That's going to solve 90% of your issues. But the reality is that choosing a poor location can significantly increase predator problems, and conversely, choosing a smart location will make it much less of an issue. The first and most obvious solution to predators is keeping your rabbits as close to your house as possible. The reality is that most predators are skittish around humans. If your rabbits are located in an area with high traffic and a lot of human activity, most predators, unless they're extremely desperate, will avoid it. The major drawback to this strategy, though, is that locating your rabbitry right next to your house can be an eyesore that your wife doesn't like so much, or it can also be a source of odors that ruins backyard barbecues. My Goldilocks zone for a rabbitry is close enough to the house that you can easily see the individual rabbits, and close enough that you can hear sounds that are going on out there, like if your rabbits are stamping their feet in alarm, but not so close that you can smell every little odor that's coming out of there or every time your rabbits are scratching at the floor. But distance from humans isn't the only thing to consider with predators. Most predators, again being skittish, prefer to approach their prey under cover. Perfect examples of bad locations for a rabbitry are right on the edge of a really large forest. This gives predators a great opportunity to come in from the forest under cover, get real close to your rabbitry without having to come out of cover, and then being able to retreat back into the forest. Unmowed fields, or even worse, overgrown fields, kind of back there a little bit with the brush that's very high, again, that is a perfect cover for most species of predators. The ideal location as far as predator behavior is concerned would be in the middle of an open field. Now, that's not optimal for a bunch of reasons we'll get to in a sec, but from a predator psychology perspective, they want to get to the rabbitry, but all around it, there's no way they can sneak up to it. And the bigger the field is and the shorter it's mowed, the longer the distance they have to travel exposed and in, no cover. And that is a very uncomfortable situation to be in if you're a predator. It's a good principle to keep in mind when you're thinking about predator psychology. Open areas with no cover are usually not friendly to predators and will keep your rabbits safer. Sorry to interrupt the video, guys. I just want to take a moment and thank this video's sponsor, High Sea Boots. If you're on a farm or homestead, or even if you just like to garden out in the backyard, you probably know that good footwear is critical. Up until now, I've been using a crappy $10 pair of Walmart boots, and I thought that was fine, but man, I did not know what I was missing. As you might have noticed, I'm wearing the High Sea men's rubber boots with the EVA midsole, and I have to say, I'm actually blown away by the quality of these boots. They're insulated on the inside, and as somebody with terrible feet, I find the actual sole that they have so much more comfortable than the dinky little plastic cardboard thing that was in my other boots. Now, I'm a huge believer in value and durability, and I was really impressed with the fact that these boots have a 100%, 100-year keep dry and warm warranty. My wife was lucky enough to get the High C women's mid-calf barn boots. She absolutely loves the colors and the chickens, and we've both been testing them now for a couple months, and we've been really, really impressed. I wouldn't be recommending these if I didn't think they were worth it, and I'm super happy with them. If you're interested in trying out the boots, I've linked them below, and if you want to support the channel and get yourself a 15% off discount, use the discount code linked below, WMRabbits. It will help us and help you. Either way, guys, thank you so much for considering them, and thank you so much to High C for sponsoring the video. Back to the video. Okay, now that we have an understanding of what our predators are up to, let's talk about natural shelter and land features. So let's start with natural shelter. The area where I'm standing is a perfect example of ideal natural shelter. Rabbits are pretty tough animals, but they're very sensitive to cold blowing winds or hot direct sunlight. Now we can engineer a solution to this problem. We can build a nice barn, a nice open-sided structure that's going to allow airflow, but is made in such a way as to block direct winds that come from, say, a prevailing direction. But that's expensive, and oftentimes it's unnecessary. If you're lucky enough to have an existing windbreak on your property or large shade trees with a nice open bottom, this is a perfect location for your rabbitry. The trees or the windbreak will take a lot of the force out of the weather around you. They'll provide free shade, and they'll eliminate strong swings in temperature that we see in, say, something like an open field, and create a bit of a more benign microclimate for your rabbits. This will make your rabbits much more comfortable, much more happy, much more productive, but it'll also save you on costs of trying to engineer an artificial solution when you could take advantage of a natural one. It's worth pointing out that forests typically aren't this open and that this area was recently brush hogged, which I have some issues with, we'll talk about in another video. That being said, a forest with large, mature shade trees and an open bottom is really just a perfect spot for a rabbitry. The other thing you want to look at on your land is the features of your land's geography. You want to locate your rabbitry on ground that would be considered generally good for any other type of construction. You want it to be firm, well-drained soil. You want it to be on a slight incline with the land sloping away in all directions from your rabbitry, carrying away water, but not a steep incline where you'd have to worry about erosion. Most importantly, you want to keep your rabbitry as far away as possible from wet ground or worse, swamps, ponds, or any other stagnant form of water. This is because these places are perfect breeding grounds for mosquitoes. In almost any climate, mosquitoes are going to be a problem. In very hot climates, they can be a devastating problem. They will feast on your rabbits. A rabbitry is like a giant spotlight in the sky to a mosquito saying free food. Rabbits can't do much about mosquitoes, and they tend to congregate on the areas that don't have a lot of fur, mainly the ears and nose. It can get real ugly. I've had issues with my rabbits before. It's not a pretty picture. If you're in the suburbs, you probably won't have as much of a mosquito pressure because the natural environment has been mostly degraded. Whereas if you're in the middle of nowhere, you're going to have a lot of mosquito pressure. But no matter where you are, biting flies and mosquitoes can be a huge problem, and keeping your rabbits as far away from their natural habitat is a must. Now, we'll talk about ways to deal with pests, insects, mites, parasites, that sort of thing in another video, but the first step is keeping them away from their breeding grounds. Now on to our penultimate consideration, which is where are you going to process the meat rabbits? Again, this may seem kind of obvious, but the purpose of meat rabbits is to produce meat. So how you're going to produce that meat, how are you going to get it processed and stored, is actually an important consideration when you're talking about rabbit housing. The most important consideration in my mind when it comes to processing is animal welfare. One of the beautiful things about raising your own meat is that your animals never have to leave your farm or homestead, and many people don't realize how much of a psychological benefit that is to animals. Most livestock species, rabbits included, are creatures of habit. They get very used to sights, sounds, and smells around them, and even just removing them from that environment causes huge amounts of stress and psychological disturbances. So if we can keep our rabbits in a familiar environment, they are going to be relaxed and happy right up until the second that they are killed and processed, and that is exactly what we're shooting for when we're producing our own meat. Rabbits and livestock in general should only have one bad day, and in the gold standard is for them to be sitting around saying, oh, what a lovely day on the farm, and then next second gone. No pain, no fear, no nothing. The closer you can process your rabbits to their housing, the more familiar the surroundings, the sights and smells are going to be, the calmer and happier they will be. So that's obviously something to shoot for. Pushing up against that, though, is that you should never process rabbits in front of other rabbits if you can help it. Now, I'm not going to get into a big ethical discussion here, but in my opinion, it's still better for the animal and for you to grow your own meat on your own property, even if your property is very small and even if you have to process very close to where your other animals are housed. There's always solutions like putting up a curtain or something, and rabbits aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. So if they can't see anything and they're upwind from where you're processing and you're doing a good job and rabbits aren't screaming because you're doing a good job, they're dying instantly, your rabbits will be totally fine. All things being equal, though, it's nice to be a little bit further away and have some kind of natural barrier, whether that's a structure or really thick windbreak between you and where you're processing your rabbits. Other things to think about for your processing location are that you want to have access to water, you want to keep it as hygienic as you possibly can, and you want to keep it as far away from neighbors if you have them as possible. It should not in any way be visible from the street, be visible from your neighbor's backyard, and you don't want people to know that you're doing this because most people are going to frown on it. Now, I realize this might be a really hard one to pull off if you're in a super urban area. And if you're in a really urban area, maybe you're just doing a few rabbits, you can do them in your garage and then clean them up in your kitchen and do whatever you need to do. If you're in a more rural area, you've got more options, but this is one that I really wouldn't negotiate on. There's a lot of creative solutions here depending on what kind of property you have, but those are the general rules to keep in mind. It's up to you to decide where you want to make compromises, but I would follow those principles as closely as you can. So now on to the final decision you need to make when you are siting your meat rabbitry. That is privacy. Privacy matters for several reasons, and it's actually pretty important, which is why I saved it for last. If you're really new to animal agriculture in general, and maybe rabbits specifically, you're probably very excited, you're ready to go out and tell everybody, you're diving into research, and you're just wrapped up in how awesome this is. Sooner or later, you're going to be faced with the reality that many people do not share that enthusiasm. This manifests itself in a lot of different ways. It can be something as simple as your neighbors just not really liking what you're doing. It can be on the more extreme side with crazy people, and it can just even be the bureaucratic, mundane reality of rabbit legality in your area. In all situations, though, privacy is your friend. Looking at legality, for example, you may be very surprised to find that in most developed areas, meat production is going to be either outright illegal, heavily discouraged, or in a legal gray zone. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do, nor am I encouraging you to break any laws, but I've voiced my opinion on this issue several times in a lot of our videos. I think if you're being conscientious and careful, you have a right to produce your own food. If your municipality or local government disagrees, that sounds like their problem. That being said, they can make your life very difficult, but what they don't know can't hurt them, and it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. So if you're taking my meaning here, it's important to maintain a low profile, even in situations where things aren't outright banned, because you don't want to stir the pot, and all things being equal, it's better if people who have power over you know less about your activities. That goes way beyond just meat rabbits, but it's generally a smart rule for life. Now, to follow that up with a slight counterpoint, as practitioners of animal agriculture, I think it's really important that we not be deliberate a-holes and respect our neighbors. These are people we live with, these are people we're going to see every day, and these are people who it pays to have a good relationship with. If you're on 5+ acres of land, you probably don't have to worry about this as much because you're far enough away from your neighbors that they're not intimately involved, and what you're doing over here doesn't really affect them. If you're on a small lot, though, this is going to be of paramount importance. I can tell you for a fact, especially in the suburbs, your neighbors may think your rabbitry is an eyesore. They definitely won't appreciate the manure smells, and they absolutely do not want to see rabbits being killed. Now, you may say that it's your land and you should be able to do what you want with it, and I just told you 10 seconds ago that you should produce your own food, and believe me, I sympathize with that and I agree, but I also think it is super important to have your neighbors on your side. These are people who can make your life very easy or very difficult, and it's also good to just be a good human being. And when it comes to neighbors, a little respect goes a long way. There'll always be jerks out there, but I find that 99% of people, when you show them a little respect and courtesy, will give that right back to you. By having your rabbitry maintain a low profile and keeping it subtle and private, you will be doing your neighbors a favor, and they will definitely appreciate that. The last reason is significantly less common, but it is unfortunately all too real, and that is crazy people. Sad reality is that our world is full of whack jobs. I wish it wasn't so, but I'm not here to talk about how the world should be. I'm here to talk about how it is. Whether this is animal rights activists, totally unhinged people, you never know. And as someone who makes public videos, I can tell you there are a lot of crazy people out there, and I get comments all the time that make me super uncomfortable, but that's the reality that the world is, and you can do a lot to avoid these problems by, again, focusing on privacy. Under no circumstances should your rabbitry be viewable from the street, even if you're on a small lot. You want to blend in, you want to look like any other normal house in your area, whatever that is, and you want to maintain a clean, subtle, odorless, quiet operation. That goes for anything in general and for any reason in general, but doubly so when we're talking about privacy. If you do that, you'll find that a lot of issues that you might otherwise run into just disappear. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's everything you want to look for when you're going to choose a new location for your rabbitry. And now that you've all been so patient, I will show you where I am going to put mine. So the location I've chose for my rabbitry is what you're looking at right behind me. As we discussed in the video, the reality is that everybody has to make compromises, but given all the things I talked about, this is kind of the best balance that I found on the new property that we have. Keep in mind that this raggedy old looking barn is not long for this world, so I am envisioning the rabbitry going approximately in this area. You can see it's an open area, it's got mature shade trees, but not so old that they're at the risk of falling. It's got a natural windbreak facing the north here, which is where we get most of the nasty weather in my area from. It's a little bit more dense than I would prefer, but what can you do? That's not my land, and it's as close as we're gonna get. On the other side, it's flanked by a field, which is going to be opened up even more as we have time here, so I don't have to worry about predators coming from that direction. Similarly, the tree line is actually pretty far in the back. I would say at least a few hundred feet away. Again, no predator pressures there. The land in this particular area does slope away. Unfortunately, it drains towards my house, but that's a separate issue. On the other side of the old stone wall over there, the land again drops away at a little bit steeper of a grade, but it's not too steep where I'm gonna have to worry about erosion getting anywhere near over here. The biggest disadvantage with this site is that as the land does slope away down past that old road, it leads into a gully which has a stream in it. The stream is pretty fast flowing in the spring, but in the late spring to early summer, it slows down enough where the water is standing and is mosquito habitat. Thankfully, in hotter years, it will dry up, but that being said, it's a little closer than I'd like as far as mosquitoes go, but I do have ways to deal with that. As I said, we'll talk about that in another video. Conversely, right behind the camera, you can see this existing concrete pad, which is gonna be the future location of our barn. Ignore all the trash, that's what we pulled out so far, but that's all gonna be gone as well. The barn is where equipment, supplies, and food will be stored. Again, it's a little closer to the rabbitry than I would like, but it's not a huge deal because the rabbitry will still be at least 30, 40 feet away, which is a little more than what rats would want to travel. Plus, it will be open field once we're done here with chickens roaming around, so I don't think we'll have too much of a pest issue. The biggest issue with this spot is that it's fairly far away from the house, which is our water supply on this property. I would probably have to stick two 100-foot hoses together to get all the way out here. I'm still going back and forth on what exact water solution we're gonna do out here, but either way, it probably won't be hard piped in, at least not anytime soon, so water will be a bit of a challenge. All in all though, I think it's a pretty good balance of everything we've talked about, and as you'll see in the upcoming videos, we'll walk through exactly how we're gonna build the rabbitry from the ground up, and eventually how we'll run that rabbitry. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you found this video useful, entertaining, or interesting, please be sure to give it a like, share, and subscribe. If you have any thoughts, questions, or want to give me some feedback, leave a comment below. If you want to support the channel even more, be sure to check out High C, this video's sponsor, or meet us over on the Patreon. We've got all kinds of other goodies. Again, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.